All right, so we're here with Aaron Reichlin-Melnick. Aaron, you're like a friend of the show. Everybody knows who you are. You're, holy cow, 21.6 thousand followers on Twitter, but no blue check. So what's going on with that?
Blue checks feel weird. I don't know. I'm, still the Twitter rabble at heart.
I see. Now, you work at the Immigration Council?
The American Immigration Council, yeah.
Tell the folks what you do there.
Honestly, a little bit of everything. So my official job title is Policy Counsel, but if you talk to anybody who works in policy, everybody kind of goes, it's like not entirely clear what our jobs are. Mm-hmm. I do everything from write comments opposing regulatory changes to a ton of media work to writing policy recommendations to like behind the scenes things, talking to people on the Hill. It's a little bit of everything, but I feel like these days I've ended up in a weird Twitter niche of just being that guy who actually keeps track of everything going on.
Yeah.
So have you been contacted by the Biden transition, or has your organization?
I can't say anything specific about that, but what I can say is that the transition team is certainly talking to NGOs.
That's a yes.
I wish, let me tell you this. I wish that I was important enough to have been independently reached out to by the transition team. And I can definitively say I have not been.
Okay.
As much as, Twitter is one thing, but I've only been doing this thing on Twitter for a couple of years, and that is not enough to get you into concierge service with incoming presidential transitions.
I mean, it worked for Neera Tanden, so...
Who famously had done absolutely nothing other than be big on Twitter.
I know. Well, I know she had a life before Twitter, but Matthew, took him a while to get around to the denial, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a yes or no question.
That's a little suspicious.
Well, because
as a judge once told me, sir, it's not a complicated question. I'll ask it again.
And did the judge then follow that up with an incredibly complicated question? Because that's kind of my experience with judges.
Yeah, something like that.
It's a yes or no question. Why did they want to kill you?
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. Tell me the meaning of life. All right, guys. So listen, and Aaron, you probably thought that you were coming on to our annual Festivus show to participate in it, but no, you are the subject of at least one of the grievances. And
crap.
Well, I mean,
it's a little bit of a booby trap.
If all of us are not a subject of at least one of the grievances, and I think we're doing it wrong,
we're failing.
To be honest.
But Matthew, this was your idea. This is your brainchild. So brainchild, is that a thing?
Yeah, it's a thing.
Okay. Yeah.
This is it.
It's first of all, grievance number one, you always make me wake up at like 7 a.m. Pacific time. I think I've made this grievance before, but so my brain is not totally turned on. But tell the folks at home about Festivus and what this show is all about.
Well, Festivus is, as we all should know, is an ancient tradition, I think going back to the Babylonians, where people who didn't really celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah or something else, they could have their own festivities. Mm-hmm. And part of that is an airing of the grievances. There's also feats of strengths and things like that, but we're a podcast and we're not in video form, so we're not going to perform feats of strength. But we encourage all of you to do so on this very special day. But the airing of grievances is a way to kind of cleanse ourselves towards the end of the year of all these things that may be bottling up inside of ourselves. Mm-hmm. So, we list our grievances, even in general to society, but also to, people that we love and cherish.
Okay.
So here it's mainly going to be societal grievances, but there might be some that might be directed at some of us.
Sure.
So, I know it's hard to have a grievance against me per se. I mean, even though Stephen had a slight one, but
it's not that hard.
But that's the purpose. So when you guys listen to this, we encourage you to tweet at us, make a comment about what your grievances are. And if they're really directed towards us or the podcast, probably just delete them. But it will be able to get that off your chest.
Right. So how do you want to start? Should we just do one at a time, or should everybody unload all their grievances at once? I think we should just rotate.
Okay.
All right. So, well, first of all, Aaron, I kind of already mentioned this, and I realize that this is a little bit of a shooting the messenger situation, but you got to just stop tweeting all this stuff about, oh, this new asylum rule makes it so that if you lose your case, you can be turned into food pellets or whatever is going on. I can't keep track of it. And I know you're not personally responsible for it, but I mean,
we believe you're not.
As far as you are a member of a thing called the American Immigration Council, that sounds pretty official. So maybe Matthew's right. Maybe you are responsible for all these.
We're not going to say that here. We don't want to pile on too much, but it's something to think into your heart.
Let's also just say that it is completely fair point that I have never been seen in the same room with Stephen Miller.
Oh,
exactly.
Wow.
Anyways, the point is, I can't keep track of it. I literally, this is probably like going to be used in a bar complaint at some point. I literally don't know what the law is right now. I don't know what the law is going to be tomorrow. And I can't help but blame you. I feel like if you just would shut up on Twitter for like 5 minutes, that would somehow make this better.
Yeah, let me pile. Wait, hold on, Aaron. I'm going to pile on. Right. I know I got to pile on a little bit because this is one of my grievances that kind of dovetail into there. Is I don't know what filing fees are anymore. I literally don't know. Every time I'm like, what's the filing fee for a work permit? Like the simplest thing we can do in immigration law. I have no idea what check I'm putting in there. And yeah, I think Stephen's right. I think we have to hold you to account for that.
We've got tens of millions of people in this country who are just choosing to ignore the election and live in an alternative reality. And I don't know why we can't use that model in the immigration world.
Look, there is some fair point to everything you're saying right here, because so many of these things are so illegal that they get blocked before they ever go into effect that to some extent, none of you need to know about them. Like, talk about the USCIS fees. All of that disaster and chaos and heartache about getting things in before the filing deadline, then they just got blocked and the fees are exactly the same.
No, Aaron, how much does it cost to file a work permit?
God, don't ask.
Nobody knows.
The last time I filled out an I-765 was like 5 years ago.
Yeah, and nobody knows.
Is it a C8 or a C9? And also, are you a member of ASAP, an organization I didn't hear about until like 3 weeks ago? And now all of my clients have this is literally what we're doing. All right. Well, real quick, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on is so we could drag you and hopefully start like a fake Twitter beef and get a bunch of Twitter followers out of it. But also, just real quick, because we literally cannot follow all of these changes. Can you give us like the dumb guy summary of what's going on?
Yeah. So the dumb guy summary of what's going on is that the last month and a half of the Trump administration is basically a guy carrying a can of gasoline and pouring it all over someone's house and holding up a lit match and just getting ready for the Biden administration and litigators to tackle him heroically right at the very end before the lit match hits the pool of gasoline and everything goes up in flames. You know, if you can tell, I've been watching some action movies lately. So that's basically where we are right now.
And in case it's lost on some people, like the stakes of this election, if there were to be a second Trump term, what are the kinds of things that we're talking about? Because you're right that a lot of us.
Come on.
No. A lot of us do take some comfort in being able to ignore some of these things because it's like, probably going to get blocked or probably kind of illegal. But some of this stuff would go through if there was a second Trump term, right?
Yeah. We have to look at the fate of some things that have managed to make it through the courts. And the 4 years of the Trump administration was like, the analogy I'd like to give is that the first year was a marathon. The second year was an Ironman. The third year was a ultra marathon. And like the fourth year was a death march in many ways for asylum and for immigrant rights policies. Because there's only so much you can do to slow things down because the president has this like ridiculous amount of authority in immigration. And while we are blessed with a Trump administration that believes that following the rules when it comes to the Administrative Procedure Act is like for babies, that in and of itself has saved our bacon on a lot of things. But if they ever got their acts together and had another 4 years to sit down and, not try to rush things out at the last second, all of those major flaws would go away. Like, we have had multiple policies blocked in the last few weeks because they can't get Chad Wolf confirmed as DHS secretary, and they screwed up the paperwork in 2019 to make him acting secretary.
Right.
And that single-handedly has saved us from, for instance, the USCIS fees I just mentioned there. One of the reasons, not the only reason, that it got blocked was because Chad Wolf is not lawfully the acting secretary, as we've talked about on this podcast before.
Right.
And so they could fix that. Like, if there was another term, they would fix that. Chad Wolf would be confirmed as DHS secretary, and we would lose that tool entirely.
Right. And of the more recent stuff, like, what are some of the things that stand out to you as being sort of the most outrageous that even our non-lawyer friends would understand?
Sure. So just earlier this morning, the government officially published.
Come on.
Literally this morning?
Literally this morning, though I was tweeting about it yesterday.
I'm going to unfollow you.
So it is, Wednesday morning, the Wednesday before Christmas, in a wonderful echoing of the time in which we accept the stranger and recognize that those fleeing persecution sometimes offer us benefits. The Trump administration has decided to kill asylum completely through a policy that declares that any person coming from a country with a COVID outbreak is a danger to the security of the United States and must be denied not only asylum, but also withholding of removal, which is the backstop protection required by the UN Protocol on Refugees. Because in their words, they believe that the mere possibility that someone might have COVID makes them such a danger to the United States that they must be immediately turned away. Of course, we have 180,000 people who are getting COVID every single day or more in community spread inside the United States, and 250,000 people enter across the border at land ports of entry or through airports every single day. But in their words, a few hundred refugees, that's the real danger. Gotta get rid of them.
It's almost like that's not really what they're concerned about.
Yeah. And that's like not even the worst thing. That's one of the worst things. But like, to give an example of another thing, there's currently right now, comments are pending and they're still accepting comments on a proposal in the immigration court system, with comments due the Monday after Christmas, because, everybody's flush with time these days. A proposal that would basically eliminate all continuances in immigration court.
Nice.
They are declaring that, little known to anybody but them, since 1996, Congress actually said that 10 days is a reasonable amount of time in order to get an attorney. And therefore, they're going to set a maximum of 40 days in which you're allowed to ask for extra time to get an attorney. And if it's been more than 40 days, judges will not be allowed to grant you even a single extra day in which to find an attorney. Awesome. So, that's going to be great for the immigration law profession.
So I do have to say, and here's what they call inside
Aaron.
Baseball.
You, Aaron.
Yeah, exactly. But the ability to get continuances for your clients is one of, or should be considered one of the top traits of an immigration lawyer. I'm just going to say it. And we all know it's true. I mean, Stephen, you would agree, wouldn't you?
I don't understand your point. I actually don't like kicking cases down the road. So, I mean, I've had things come up and yeah, you need to get a continuance. But I think Aaron's talking about the situations where people show up unrepresented.
But it is true. Like, how many times have you had a consultation with someone who you really might not be able to do anything for? And you've said, hey, listen, you have a hearing coming up in like 2 weeks. Just go tell the judge you're looking for an attorney. They'll give you a date to come back. And then, whenever you're going to have to go back, come see us again. Maybe things have changed or whatnot. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be a viable option for people nowadays.
Yeah, but in that circumstance, they are still genuinely looking for an attorney.
Yeah, of course, because
and so under this rule, even people who are still genuinely looking for attorneys would not be allowed to have extra time. Oh, and Stephen, your point about sometimes I need a continuance because things come up. Well, under this rule, judges would be banned from using an attorney's workload as a reason to grant additional time, because in their words, attorneys should just know how to properly manage their cases and should never need additional time for any reason. And therefore, judges should not be allowed to grant them any continuances because of attorney workload.
Right.
Because, that's how it works, right?
Feel personally attacked there.
I've never asked for a continuance because I'm busy. That, I think, sounds like a lawyer problem if that's you. But I have had situations, this happens all the time, like if you're scheduling a hearing at a master calendar hearing, you have the advantage of like having a back and forth with the judge about when you're available, right? So, I've got a hearing that day. And coming from far away from the immigration court, it's about a 3-hour drive for me. It's very convenient because I can stack cases. Like I'll be here already that day. Let's do it in the afternoon. And cases get set over so much by the immigration court and they don't call us to schedule things. And so I end up double booked, in Portland and Seattle. And I have to ask for, one case or the other to be set over, but not because I'm like dilatory or trying to, game the system. And so that's going to be awesome if they mess up my calendar and then I can't get out of their dumb mistake. That's going to be cool.
Well, it's too bad like they don't have some type of electronic system of calendar and cases where they could actually look it up.
Right. Matthew's being sarcastic because that does.
I just got scheduled for individual hearing on top of another individual hearing that I have in a different court in a different city. So now I have to like motion to continue, and I know the judge is going to be all peeved, but like they could have called me or they could have just checked the system and they would have seen I was booked. But it's annoying. Anyways, let's do a new grievance.
Yeah, let's move on, Matthew. Or actually, let's go to Aaron.
Yeah,
and we've been a little hard on him, but
what do you guys say, Aaron?
I mean, my biggest grievance is that I have to deal with all of this crap in
we can edit
days
this out
before Christmas. You guys have to read it, but you guys have to see the tweets. I have to sit there and dig into it at 8:45 a.m. in the morning. So there's grievance number 1. The Federal Register publishes at 8:45 a.m. and should not. I would say 9:30 a.m. is a much better time to do it. Give me a little bit of time to settle into the morning and not have to just be like, bam, going from moment 1. So grievance number 1, for the love of God, push the Federal Register time when they publish things to after 9 a.m.
Well, I mean, you could just wait till 9, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's fair.
Who's gonna?
I mean, just don't look at it to 9:30 or 10.
Who are the people on Twitter that are gonna like beat you to the punch if you're sleeping in?
There are people. So here's the sort of like how the sausage is made thing is that the Federal Register's website doesn't email your like notifications that there's new things out until about 9:15. So I got like a half an hour window if I'm the one person sitting there refreshing the website where I can be like first on it compared to somebody who waits until they get it in the email.
Wow. Okay. Well, it doesn't matter because I'm unfollowing you anyways, but that's...
And we're encouraging everyone to do so.
Everybody should unfollow Aaron. His account is the worst. Not really. It's actually the best. But all right, that's a good one. Matthew, what do you got?
Well, I'm going to just step away from immigration law for just a minute. We'll get back to it. But I have a grievance for people with leaf blowers. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm talking to you people. You don't need every leaf off your yard. You just don't. So don't spend 2 hours trying to clear those extra leaves. If you don't want them, go pick. It's not that hard. But you don't. Whenever I'm walking in my neighborhood and I see someone with an immaculate lawn, like no leaves, and I live in a neighborhood with a lot of trees, a lot of leaves, they just annoy me. It's okay to have a couple leaves on your yard. It's
you don't even like to see the end result.
No, because I know how it got there. I know how they got there. Because if you're raking leaves, you're not getting every single one, or unless you're some type of ridiculous
psychopath.
human. Yeah.
Right.
And I know you use a leaf blower, and I know you use it for way too long. And I hear it all the time in my neighborhood. Now we're kind of getting a little past it. But it's really annoying. You can have a couple leaves on your yard. It's fall. It's fall. Leaves
Especially
fall from
winter.
the tree.
Especially winter right now.
Yeah, well, hey, this isn't grievances for the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is grievances for the whole year.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So leaf blowers, really, I mean,
have you read this, that they also have like the worst emissions out of any type of motor? There's some sort of like weird loophole where they're allowed to just be like super polluting.
It's the big leaf blower, lobby.
Big leaf blower. Yeah.
And it's,
the leaf blower industrial complex.
Also, whatever happened to making your children rake your lawns? And I get it, not everybody has children, but
Exactly.
That's certainly what I had to do when I was a kid.
My kids were helping me rake the lawn until my oldest smacked my youngest in the eye with the rake. And that kind of brought the whole thing crashing to an end. But
we had this giant, it must have been 200 years old, an oak tree in our backyard, just taking massive dumps every fall on our yard. And
you cut it down, right?
No, my parents, we had to get out there, and it was the worst ever. And then I see my neighbors now, and they've got teenage kids. I've never seen them do a lick of work. They hire clients of mine to go clean up their yard. So,
well, I mean, it does, you're right. Laziness does produce jobs, and we shouldn't be in some ways undermining the landscaping industry by complaining, but
that's true.
I do get your grievances.
The landscaping industry can use rakes too.
Listen, it would take more time, and that means more money.
That's true. A green landscaping company that doesn't pollute. So I think it's my turn. Let's see. All right. So I already crossing Aaron off my list and got that one. Okay. So my grievance is for anyone who opposed or is opposing DACA in any way. And there's two tiers. I think most people who listen to the show know DACA is a work permit that you have to renew every 2 years at pretty great expense. And that's all it is. And it's for kids or people, I guess many of them are adults now, who are brought here before they turned 15. They have to have been here since 2007. They can't have any serious criminal history. There's a bunch of requirements, right? Yeah, so it's not even everyone who was brought here. It's just a few of them. And it's just a work permit. And it's a work permit that they can lose if they commit a crime or, whatever. So it's really annoying to have DACA, but also really life-changing for those who have it. And if you've stood in the way of DACA just existing in any way, the first group of people are passive obstacles, people who either didn't vote or voted for Trump. You can go f*** yourself, first of all. But then there's this other group of people. I'm always amazed at this, looking at like the ongoing litigation in Texas. There are politicians, but also lawyers who are spending hundreds of hours, maybe thousands of hours litigating these cases to try and destroy this simple, really small, but massively beneficial program for just, people who want to have jobs or live with some modicum of dignity. And like, if you're dedicating any amount of your life's work to standing in the way of that, like, I just, really you, but you forever. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? It makes me so angry. It's really, really, really obnoxious. So that's my second one.
Man, I got to say, my grievance of the Federal Register publishing at 8:45 a.m. just really seeming insufficient in face of that one.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I still think my leaf blowing thing was more. Well, I understand the DACA thing. I get it.
Okay. All right, Aaron, do you have a second one? Or was that your only grievance?
Oh, yeah, no. Obviously, my life is going perfect. There's no other grievances going on right now.
Oh, great.
God, where to even start? If we're pulling away from immigration. My current grievance is it's cold and we live in a pandemic. And that means that the only way to see friends is to bundle up and freeze like crazy just to see people for a little bit outside. So basically, weather, global warming. I know that I don't want it, but this year, if we wanted to happen to have an extremely mild winter where it was 50 or 60 degrees every single day, just a weird quirk, I'll take it.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I'm going to run through a few of these here.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is in no particular order. People who wear masks under their noses.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And that's kind of like putting a condom on your balls. Okay.
Hashtag MAGA resistance. You pull that thing down, you're basically storming Normandy.
People hating on Granny Smith apples. They are delicious. Okay.
They're not. I'm just going to come out and say it. They're not.
No, they are delicious.
Do you also like red delicious?
No, red delicious and Macintosh apples are trash.
All right. At least we agree on that point.
Okay. But Granny Smith apples, they're delicious. And people hate on them. They suck.
They're a good baking apple. They're a good baking apple.
You just eat them. I have one on my desk. I'm going to eat it after the show.
They're a good baking apple is true. And what it means is if you douse it in sugar and then chemically alter it in an oven, then
you don't like sour?
Then it becomes an edible piece of fruit. But otherwise, not,
Okay.
Which is basically...
I'm not done. Okay. People who don't mute their telephones during telephonic master hearings. This might be a hearing where there might be like 20 attorneys on their phone. And inevitably, there's one or two that you hear the clicking and clacking of their keyboards and them talking in the background. Hate those people.
They have clickety-clackety phone keyboards?
No, they're on their phone, but it's not muted. So they're on their...
Somebody bring a typewriter?
Yeah,
somebody brought a typewriter?
But they're tapping on their keyboards.
Their laptops. Doing work. Okay, I see.
They're keyboards. They're not laptops. Do you work at a laptop in your office?
I do.
You're weird.
Oh, you mean? Oh, wait, hold on. Time out. Are you talking about people calling in to telephonic masters? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. And they don't. Okay.
And they're there with a group of, there are 10 other people on the line, and they're just waiting their turn. And they don't have it on mute. And then you hear the judge is like, can you all please put your phones on mute? But they have no way to know which one is violating this social norm.
This is the thing I don't get about this is we are now 10 months into this, and it was already a social norm about keeping yourself muted on a conference call. How is it that people have not developed the instinct 10 months into this thing to automatically check their mute?
Well, it's the same thing with people going through metal detectors. Okay. I'm sorry. We've all gone through metal detectors probably, the vast majority of our lives by now. And you don't know to take off your watch or take your cell phone out of your pocket or to take off your belt. Hate those people. Okay, I'm not done.
I did once accidentally try to take a Swiss Army knife into a Smithsonian museum and got seriously yelled at by the guards there because
deservedly so.
I had just forgotten I had it. And they're like, are you trying to bring in this knife to this museum? And I was like, no, but yes. And then I hid it in a bush outside and it was still there when I came back.
Nice.
Okay, so clients who call and call and call your office but refuse to leave a message, and in my case, then call my wife and leave a message with her.
Wait.
So like 2 or 3 times a month, I have my wife going, oh, so-and-so called me, and they've been trying to get in touch with your office, and no one's calling them back.
You need to explain why all these clients have your wife's phone number.
Well, my wife used to work with me. She's big in the community. Everyone knows.
Okay, there it is.
Okay, just a couple more random ones. The Toronto Maple Leafs. The Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't get it. It's leaves. Why? I don't get it. I always hated that. And then one I'll just expand on a little bit. It might be a little bit more serious. Immigration detention. I really have a problem with immigration detention. And it's not necessary. And it really shouldn't be a thing. Every time I'm doing a detained case, I'm thinking, why are these people detained? Why are they in jail? And maybe you can make a case for people who are awaiting removal to their country, like everything has been finished for them. They have a final order of removal. But there is no one in immigration detention being held by ICE that is actively serving a criminal sentence. Either they've never had a criminal sentence, or if they had one, it's been served. So I really think, and Aaron, we're going to hold you responsible if this doesn't happen with the Biden administration, that they need to end immigration detention.
You're so right. And this
I know, Aaron. I don't need
just saying, but one of the things that I'm like incredibly excited about is that my organization, and we actually endorsed ending immigration detention this year, because 2020, I think, was a breaking point for a lot of people who had sort of maybe internally thought, look, this is ridiculous. As you said, there is absolutely no good reason to do this. It just harms people. And, no one's serving a sentence. Everyone's already done their time and they should be out of jail, or they have no criminal record at all. And we know that they will go to court in the vast majority of cases anyway. It's like, it's useless. It's harmful. It literally kills people. And so we have now officially said, like, we are on the abolish immigration detention train. And next year, we are not going to take, you just reduced it 25% as an answer anymore.
Do we know how many people are in immigration detention?
Right now, it's about 15,500. It's the lowest it's been in about 15 to 20 years because of the pandemic.
What are the percentage of the people that are in immigration detention that do not have a final order of removal? Do you have any idea?
I think in a normal situation, it's usually 75% or so. These days, because many of those people have been released because of the pandemic or some variant, and they've deported a lot more who did have a final order. I think we're in a situation where it's probably a larger percent than normal have a final order. But as you know, that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It means they went in front of a judge in rural Louisiana who denies 100% of cases, and all they have to do is get in front of a real judge who actually cares about the law, and they're going to get it reversed, or not, because they're in the Fifth Circuit, or the 11th Circuit, and they're screwed.
Even 15,000 is not a huge number. So it's not like you're saying we're releasing 300,000 people into the interior of the United States. It's a small number. And I think that really, really weighs in the favor of ending it.
Yeah.
Because there are other ways to monitor people. How many millions of people do we have on probation, in monitoring in the criminal justice system? And we seem to handle that just fine.
And I would point out there are currently 86,000 people on alternatives to detention right now.
Right. I've got a client who has a pending petition for review at the Ninth Circuit, and the judge found that he was a flight risk because the judge didn't think that the Ninth would reverse his crappy decision. So that makes him a flight risk. And so he was detained for over a year. And then I got a call like a week ago that he'd been released. Just like no bond. ICE didn't ask for a bond. They put an ankle monitor on, and he's got check-ins because he does have a final order. And that's happened to me multiple times where somebody's been detained, for a really long time. And then they're just let go because of bed space issues or health concerns. And it just shows that, like, oh, you said this person was a real danger, and then you just let him go without any kind of conditions, really.
My very first client in law school in clinic was a Jamaican guy who'd been living in the United States for like 15 years, had U.S. citizen children, married to a U.S. citizen. They picked him up in Philly and detained him in Howard County, Maryland, in a really crappy local jail. So crappy that the DHS OIG just recently put out a report talking about how crappy it was and how much it violated ICE's own rules. And he got out because of the sequester, the budget sequester. Like ICE had released 1,000 people, and they're like, yeah, I guess this guy's fine. Like, why the hell was he put in jail in the first place then?
I've got a guy who's detained right now, and it's terrible to be detained at any time, but to be away from your family during the holidays, I think, is especially cruel. And the situation is that he's a pending DUI from literally a year ago. He was out going to court, doing all this stuff. And then a year later, ICE decided to detain him. And we asked the local ICE for bond. They said no. He went to a bond hearing, and the judge wanted to know what his BAC was on the pending DUI charge. So he hasn't been found guilty. And according to the police report, he blew a 0.0, but they were waiting for a discovery on the blood draw. And my client denies being on anything. He was tired or whatever. And the judge denied bond, saying that we hadn't met our burden of proof to prove that he wasn't a danger, because we needed to provide the immigration court with the criminal discovery on the pending charge, which is absurd. There's a criminal court where criminal cases are decided, right? And then there's an immigration court. They're two separate things. But one of the issues is, in situations like this, ICE routinely brings people in to ICE custody before their criminal proceedings are even finished, where the local judge has determined that, the person's either paid a local bond or they're often released on their own recognizance. And then they end up in immigration court with their case ongoing below. And it
is crazy because that judge and that prosecutor that are kind of driving that decision to either pay a small bond or release without a bond live in the community where that person's going to typically, right?
Right.
And generally speaking, immigration judges that are in detained settings live nowhere near that individual. So it seems like you should trust the people that are making that decision that that person should have their freedom and they're not a danger to their own community. That should be given great weight. But whenever you make the argument, you get the eye rolls by immigration judges.
It's the same thing that ICE does when they put out these really horrific, wanted posters. Is ICE thinks it's a super cop. Even though ICE has a limited role to do civil immigration enforcement, ICE thinks that it knows better than local prosecutors, local judges, and the entire criminal justice system, because God forbid somebody that a judge who sees people with criminal records every single day can say in the judge's expertise is not a threat. ICE is like, no, they're an immigrant. We must lock them up. And it's just ridiculous.
Right.
You guys talked a little bit about people where judges had some discretion and refused to exercise that discretion. There are people who are subject to mandatory detention, which just kind of boggles your mind. I'm working on one case where a young lady who came in as a refugee when she was 12, and then she got permanent residence. And 7 or 8 years later, she was convicted of a theft offense and sentenced to a year in jail, even though she only did time served up to a year. And immigration law, if you're that type of sentence, even if you don't do anywhere near the year, it's an aggravated felony. And if it's an aggravated felony, the judge has no discretion. It's mandatory detention. And there are a lot of people like this young lady who would not be considered a flight risk, certainly not a danger, but the judge can't even rule on detention. But ICE could, right? ICE doesn't, they say it's mandatory detention, but ICE can release a person if they want. Yeah. That's what we're hoping with the new administration, that they say, what, this whole immigration detention scheme that we have is ridiculous. Let's end it. And now we know from a practical standpoint, that does not mean that there are no longer going to be immigration detention. That's just practically speaking, we know that. But I think the fight has to be to end immigration detention.
I think so too. I mean, look, we're at a time right now with the lowest level of people in ICE detention in decades. And is the community less safe? Hell no. Of course not. And the other thing that I get that people don't get a lot of times is that in the normal, last decade, most of the people, almost every single year, the majority of the people locked in ICE detention were refugees who came to the border and sought asylum. In 2019, when there were 55,000 people in ICE detention, about 55 to 60% of them were just people who had come to our border and asked for our protections, and we threw them in jail for it. That is a problem.
Well, you have to give Trump credit. He's not throwing a lot of those people in jail. He's just making them live in squalor on the other side of the border in Mexico in horrendous conditions. So at least he's not throwing them in U.S. jail.
And so I will say, I'm going to put in a pitch for a book for people if you haven't read it. There's a book called Migrating to Prison that was put out by a University of Denver College of Law professor named Cesar Cuauhtemoc Garcia Hernandez.
Friend of the show.
Yep. He's great. For years, I used to read his blog, crimmigration.com. And I cannot recommend that book more highly. It does the best job I've ever seen of breaking down just how terrible and useless and unnecessary immigration detention is, in a way that I could hand that book to somebody who knew nothing about immigration law and they would get the point of it and understand it.
Yeah, can
and
you send that
know
to
how hard
Stephen?
that is.
Can you send that to Stephen?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so immigration detention, I think that's where we left off. We're going a little long. I guess, unless there's anything else, I wanted to just add one more thing. And this is a complicated one for me. My shtick on the show is to say that I love the judges and I love ICE. And the reason I do that is because it's funny. And also because in reality, not every single day, but usually once a week, I'm communicating with somebody from USCIS or ICE, and I'm asking essentially for favors that are legal, right? I'm not asking for I'm not bribing them or whatever, but hey, this client's got a check-in. Can we, move this thing along or, this or that? And there is the real possibility that people will listen to this. And, I just have to maintain some sort of professional working relationship with the folks in that agency. But I just will say this, recently, especially, I feel like in the last few months, mostly ICE litigators in court are being unnecessarily litigious, just opposing things or fighting on points where we've clearly met our burden. And they're just going through the motions and putting people through the stress of removal proceedings and tough interrogation when we have a slew of doctors' letters and evidence and proof of the things that we need to prove. And in one case, I think I mentioned this last week, so that maybe this is repetitive, but after we were done with this long cross-examination, the attorney admitted, yeah, they've met their burden and they qualify. And it wasn't like we had met our burden because of the cross-examination. The cross-examination was purely performative and it served no real purpose. And just like the people who are fighting to destroy DACA, I have to wonder, what are you doing going to work and not fighting to deport the guy who murdered his girlfriend or whatever, but to, really give this single mom of 5 a hard time about why can't you just move to some other part of Mexico or whatever, all while admitting on the back end that I don't give a about any of this. Those are the kinds of things that make terrible things possible, right? Yes, there's big decisions by Stephen Miller and the president is a monster, but at the end of the day, it's regular people just doing a 9-to-5, going in and doing this kind of stuff. And it's really, really, really frustrating. It makes me really angry.
I do have to say, I am really over the disdain I can hear in some of the government attorneys' voices when they're questioning my clients. I mean, just dripping. I just had one recently where the guy was not very tax compliant. I hear he's a father of 4. He has 4 U.S. citizen children, U.S. citizen wife. Seems like a really good guy, hardworking and all that. Had, a few bumps in the road, but really nice guy. And just the disdain. This one government attorney brings up a letter that we included for continuous presence. We had to show that he'd been here more than 10 years from 2008 that was addressed to him, written in English from a dentist saying hey, you missed your son's dental appointment. This is very serious, blah, blah, blah. And she's just hammering him on it. And the guy's I have no idea what you're talking about. And she's you don't know anything about this letter? The guy doesn't speak English. It was obviously his wife is a U.S. citizen. Obviously, she would have been the one dealing with it. But just her whole way of dealing with it with contempt. It's just just treat people like humans, Those kind of things really bother me. And Stephen's right. In immigration court, what you're trying to do is demonstrate that the person's eligible for relief. It's not like criminal court where the prosecutor is trying to convict the person. We're all trying to come to a resolution. Does this person qualify for this relief? And there has to be some testing, I guess, from government attorneys and all that. But at the end of the day, the goal should be, okay, does this person qualify? Let's find that out. And so many government attorneys use it as they're trying to convict this person of being a bad person.
Yeah.
And it's really like you little privileged person, okay, who's had everything the right way your entire life because of who you are, the circumstances of your birth. And you have a guy who's struggled his entire life, and you're going to sit there and judge him on that. And especially when the guy is admitting all his faults and mistakes and how he's trying to make himself better. And there are some government attorneys who absolutely do have grace, and I think they do things the right way, but they're few and far between. And we all know it as practitioners. The good ones, so to speak, are in the vast minority. And even the good ones, you kind of shake your head sometimes at them.
Yeah, but part of that's just the job, and it forces you to dehumanize people, and especially forces you to dehumanize people when the leadership from the top orders you to do this sort of thing. And that's why there's so few good people, because a lot of them just quit and leave because they don't want to do it.
Yeah, see, I think that's a good argument for janitors, right? And I think that's a good argument for people who don't have high education and aren't attorneys, who don't have skill set, right? For the receptionist, for the I
think you've got a higher view of the skill set of the average attorney than maybe I do.
I do a podcast for Steven, so I live in reality.
We know how much we suck, okay? It's not a secret.
It's just like they are making choices for themselves. So I do think there is something where it comes from the top and their influence from the top, but they make their choices. Like, you can conduct an asylum hearing or a cancellation hearing as a government attorney and not dehumanize the person. Let's figure out if they're eligible for relief, right? Have they been here for more than the 10 years? Would their children or spouse suffer extreme and unusual hardship, as we've outlined it through case law? Have they committed an act that would disqualify them? Are they a person of good moral character? These are things that you can do without dehumanizing the person.
Right. My point really quickly was that the system itself is so rotten, is so venal and unrelated to these principles you're talking about of trying to find some fairness and justice and testing the evidence. And it isn't. The system as exists does not actually, despite what it might say on paper, allow for those sort of things. And as a result, even the best-minded, best-intended people become corrupted the moment they touch it. Because, I firmly believe that the system is so broken and damaged and harmful that you cannot touch it without losing a part of yourself that recognizes that what you're doing is dehumanizing people and harming them and treating them like bodies, as ICE calls people in detention. We've got another 5 bodies coming your way. That's what I'm saying. That was my point. It wasn't to say that people are not making individual choices to go along, to get along, because I definitely think they are. But I think that even if you do go in there with a good intention and you are conscious at every moment of your attempt to do better, even the best-minded person, I think, when inside that system, could not help but dehumanizing people from over time.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
That's fair.
Aaron, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. People should check you out on Twitter.
They should wait until after inauguration if they want some good news.
After inauguration. What's your Twitter handle?
Just my last name, @Reichlin-Melnick, ReichlnMelnick.
And Matthew is on Twitter, but he's not such a great follow, so don't worry about that.
That's unfair.
And have a happy holidays, guys. We should say Merry Christmas, since this is going to be the last time in a while that we can do that.
That's
so
true.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy whatever you're celebrating these days. I hope you get some time to relax and disconnect and not follow me on Twitter for at least another week.
I was going to say, my feat of strength these next 2 days, I'm literally going to put my phone away, and I'm not going to check anything. And that's going to be my big feat of strength. So
Yeah, I think I might delete the Twitter app for at least 24 hours.
Nice. All right, guys. Have a good one.
Happy Festivus.
Happy Festivus.
Nothing. It's a card from my dad.
What is it? Wait. Dear son, happy Festivus? What is Festivus?
It's nothing.